right, ladies and gentlemen, while the judge is giving some instructions to the jury, we're going to take an opportunity to bring in another expert that we have here today. This is a criminal defense attorney, Pate. Page, welcome to the Law&Crime Network.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Great to have you here. What do you think that viewers should be watching for in this case? We know it's an insanity defense case. What would you be watching for if you were representing Timothy Jones in this matter?
Well, I think as your coverage has mentioned earlier, these insanity cases really boil down to expert witness testimony and how accepting the jury is to believe an insanity defense. It is very difficult for the defense to put on a case of insanity that will ultimately convince a jury not to hold a defendant responsible when they have a horrible crime like this that they really feel someone needs to pay for. So I think we'll see the theme from the very beginning of the case all the way through their cross-examination of the state's witnesses, and then finally with the presentation of the defense case, that this individual did not know what he was doing or could not have prevented the actions that he took that particular day.
Yeah, and I mean, Katie, you've said the same thing. Bringing in these experts and the battle of the experts is such an important part of these cases.
You know, and he makes a really good point, which is the jury has to want to let him off.
Yeah.
You know, there's part of that. It's not just the legal mechanisms, but they have to want to not hold him responsible for this heinous crime. And man, that's a really tough one in this situation where he killed all of his children.
Right. Paige, I want to bring you back in because that's part of the job of the defense attorney, right? Is to do what they can to make their client as likable or as sympathetic as they can with respect to this mental disease or defect that they're claiming.
Well, and that's difficult to do, and I think everyone would agree with that. And so you run the risk, if you're a defense lawyer, if you focus too much on your client, then you're going to get some pushback from the state as well as from the jury. Say, wait a minute, I don't care what's wrong with your client. I have a bunch of dead children here, and somebody needs to pay for that. So I really think the right approach here is to focus less on the defendant, more on the expert testimony, and really try to present almost a scientific legal defense that stays away from, emotion or sympathy and really tries to keep it cold and just stick to the best story that you have, which is what you hope is going to come from your expert.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Paige. One of the things that I've been waiting for lately as I watch these cases unfold at the Law&Crime Network is MRIs of the brain and studies of the brain, because I do know that those types of studies now we're seeing with things like CTE, those types of studies actually can support an insanity defense or some damage to the brain. Do you think that this is the type of case where that would be helpful?
Absolutely, because I think it's hard for the jury just to hear somebody say, well, I didn't know what I was doing, or to even have a doctor say, I've interviewed him, I've tried to treat him, and I am of the opinion he didn't know what he was doing, especially when, like here, you have experts who apparently disagree on that. So the more scientific the evidence is, I think the better shot the defense has at actually convincing the jury that there's some insanity here.
I agree with you completely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so now you have heard the openings from both the prosecutor and the defense. Prosecutor starting well, talking about the malice inherent in this act. But man, Kate, I want to bring you in, and then Paige. The defense has a lot to work with in this case. I think that we were all, I know that Paige too, we were all sort of looking up every time something else popped up. What do you think?
There's so much there. Yeah. I mean, as we all had stressed how difficult these cases are, this is all the hallmarks of one that can really be in the fight.
Yeah.
You know, we have physical brain damage, we have diagnosis by the military that he had a mental health problem, we have all of this significant medication throughout history, and also what I think is really important is that he said the prosecution expert believes that he was psychotic
at the time of the event.
Yeah. So there's a lot to work with there.
Paige, what do you think? What of, the defense, as Kate just pointed out, the defense just laid out a lot of things that will help to support at least the premise of insanity. What do you think is the strongest of what he mentioned?
Well, I have to agree that the fact that the United States Navy diagnosed him as having a severe mental illness, then the state's psychiatrist did the same. Now, I understand since then the state has retained a different expert who may have a different opinion, but as we predicted, the entire theme of the opening statement for the defense was look at his mental illness, look at it scientifically, look at how it affected his life, and look how it led to what happened on that particular day. I think both of these lawyers are trying a great case, but I think the defense here laid some bait for the prosecution. I think the defense wants to make this case about was he mentally ill or not, and not so much whether that mental illness affected what he did that day. So a mistake on the prosecution's part from this point forward would be to try to attack whether or not he had mental illness. That's not what they need to do. They need to focus on whether the defense, even assuming something's wrong with the guy, meets the legal standard. So it's going to be an interesting case to watch.
It sure is. And I think your points were very well made and very well spoken. Kate, I want to bring it back to you, because I do agree with Paige. I mean, this is some good lawyering on both sides, and a really important little point for the jury to decide on whether he could, not that he wasn't insane, but whether or not he could conform his actions to the law at that point in time. But one of the things the defense attorney did there, was use this analogy of the trees and the planting of the trees and where the trees. What did you think of that?
Listen, I think he did a great job. It's not personally my style. It's not my taste. I understand what he was going for, was trying to bring in this theme. And some jurors like that. I didn't see the connective tissue. I thought it was a bit attenuated and it felt a little phony to me.
Yeah.
But I guess the real trick is if it's going to work.
Right.
I mean, if it works, use it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kate, I want to thank you for being here. I know that when we come back from the break, you will no longer be here. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. I will be here with Paige as we continue to go through the day. We know that in Jones, they have left for the day. They're going to come back tomorrow with their first witnesses and leave the jurors thinking about the openings from both sides in the case and all of the great issues that Paige and Kate have both brought up. With respect to that analogy, it's interesting to see whether or not the defense attorney will bring that back up in his closing and throughout the course of the case look for things to support that analogy. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. But in the meantime, here at the Law and Crime Network, we still have plenty to do for you. While we've been watching Jones, the case has been going on in Vermont against Stephen Burgoyne, also an insanity case. But now that we have so much evidence in the Jones case, this Burgoyne case doesn't look as strong as it maybe once did. So it's going to be really interesting to be able to follow these cases together with these fabulous legal experts that we have here working with us at the Law and Crime Network to analyze these cases. When we come back from break, we're going to go straight to that courtroom in Vermont, and we'll be watching that case in its entirety. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after the break in the courtroom in Vermont.